We were just finishing college then, I think. It was a really kind of busy time. It was a fun time using various different projects. I was shooting a lot of film, shooting large format, and this was a digital project, you know. We did some work together, myself and Joseph Carr, another student on it. And just in terms of our approach, we had a brief, you know, to cover, you know, the exterior of the buildings, you know, the landscape around it, to record that. We were given maps of the site from the architects and the master planners. We got access to the buildings, what to focus on, shooting on a tripod, shooting wide shots, and then getting in closer, studying in TU Dublin, the 3-picture story, for example, and, you know, with Anthony Haughey, and how important it was to get that in terms of coverage, you know, because these are going to be historical documents, they're going to be used for planning applications. So the nurses' home was over here, but that was demolished. It was a massive red brick building, and a lot of people would have remembered it in the city, you know. There's probably hundreds of nurses living in it at one stage. But the lintel it had this kind of Art Deco sculpture over the door, and these beautiful lamps on the right and left as you entered on the pillars. Yeah, it was kind of a modernist design in stone, a beautiful sculpture. So I photographed that, and subsequently it was really nice that a student here in TU Dublin, Jason Lawler, wrote a little piece about that, which is available, I think, on the Grangegorman Histories website. He did some additional research into it. So it's really nice to make those connections, and how the photographs still have a life. I was really interested in photography as a teenager, and I started playing around with, I suppose there were disposable film cameras, buying some of those, taking photographs, and then I had a friend who had his dad had a little bit of a darkroom set up, and he printed some of the photographs for me. And then my friend Terry, in his attic, he got a darkroom kit, so we set that up a few times, and he had his dad's old camera, an old film camera, so we shot a few rolls on that. And can't remember how we did the negatives, but we definitely printed some stuff. My mum would have gotten me a membership for what was then the Gallery of Photography, that's now the Photo Museum, and I went to a few exhibitions there, got to really like it, and started using the darkroom there as well, and kind of teaching myself really. Later on, I lived in this part of the city. I lived in Stony Batter, I lived in the Liberties, and a lot of my projects were connected with it. And I suppose they became, in some ways, long-term projects like Grangegorman here, and associated projects that I was involved in. But yeah, a lot of my projects do involve the social. I suppose they're not like a typical, you know, a landscape image that's disconnected from, you know, time and place in some sense. You know, a lot of them would be involved in the cities or communities, like that, you know, the social is really, really important in that. Kind of avoided photographing things like that were quite personal, and even, you know, the stuff in the archive boxes, kind of avoided that, or stuff that was getting ready to be packed, you know, because I didn't have a discussion with the archivists around it. We just didn't meet up, you know, we weren't connected in that sense. So and it brought up a lot of memories about it. It was quite an emotional experience, photographing the hospital. Yeah, it was really intense, to be honest. I found it really difficult. Yeah, there's a number of projects I did, and I suppose in some ways they're connected with these institutional spaces. In, you know, the 19th century in Ireland. I did a project down in Callan, on the Callan workhouse there. So I was awarded a residency there, a commission. Would have been Workhouse Union then, it's Canton Workhouse Union now. So that got me thinking about that. And then I worked on a project in the Butler Gallery, and that would have been an almshouse at one point. So I was commissioned by Kilkenny County Council and the Butler Gallery to document the transformation into the new gallery and also the preservation of the building as well. Did projects over here in Dublin called Shomera in 1916. I saw a sign on a wall, looking at the history, looking back, and then, looking forward to, how they were reused and repurposed, and maybe how we think about memory and our association and attachment. And, I suppose I felt it was important to somehow record these spaces to keep that conversation going into the future, that they weren't just transformed and that in the past and the history glossed over. The Glass Garden was that was a really exciting time. Grangegorman Public Art had put out like open calls for various different commissions, probably around 2015, I'd say, if I remember. So I was delighted to be awarded one of those to work with ASOG and Step by Step. These are local organisations here in Stoneybatter and Smithfield, supporting children in an after schools environment, children and their families. So yeah, that was brilliant. And then it was very exciting to be able to access, the wider site with like the studios and the dark rooms, as part of the photography facilities here, so that was absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed that experience. The children loved being in the studio, the proper cameras and the lights, and and then a red light dark room is something they'd probably only seen in the movies. And it was a lovely time, and we did a publication, and we made a couple of videos around it as well. I think that's all available on the website. Talking to Catherine Martin, she introduced me to Claire Lanigan from the Digital Repositories Ireland, which was like a bit of a revelation for me. There's amazing stuff on that website if people haven't seen it. So yeah, I spoke to Claire about a selection of images. So when we worked through a selection, and then I went back and did like post-production on those. A lot of them were in a kind of we call them raw files in photography. They're in a raw state, so they would have been ready for upload to the DRI website. There was a handful maybe on my website, but really, a lot of them hadn't been seen before. So that's kind of, in process at the moment, and quite exciting to share that work, and they could be downloaded and used under a Creative Commons license if people want to, researchers, whoever wants to use them, they're there, and I'm really happy about that. And the edit was quite broad, and actually in reflection, that's a really good idea, because as photographers, we're used to giving clients a selection and try to keep that selection quite tight, quite small, because we're conscious we don't want them looking at loads of images because their time is precious or whatever, And even for commissions and open calls, you have a very small selection. So for the DRI, like it was broad, and there's quite a few images selected. I suppose for historical purposes, things that I mightn't think are important. Historians of visual culture, for example, or architecture.
Design historians even.
Design, exactly, Anne. See these little details and go, okay, this is interesting,